Welcome to AZ Central's Election Show, where we bring you inside the newsroom to take a deeper dive on the issues and people who are affecting this year's midterm elections. This week, we'll talk a little bit about the importance of independent voters who almost are on par with Republicans to make up the largest electoral bloc in the state. Then, we'll hear from independent voters, what's on their minds and what are they thinking about as they prepare to cast their ballots. Then, our team of reporters will break it down for you.
The share of Arizona voters who aren't members of either major political party has more than doubled over the past 20 years. There are as many independent voters as there are registered Republicans in the state. Researchers at Arizona State University have noted younger voters are more likely to be independents, and the group as a whole tends to be unimpressed with politics as usual.
You know that there are more of them than there are baby boomers? Polls show both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton having a pretty tough time attracting a lot of them. Many in the key voting bloc turning to the third-party candidates.
In some cases, independents feel a major obstacle to supporting parties they otherwise have broad agreement with, such as abortion rights or what they view as hostility toward minorities. Many complain that politicians are disconnected from the people they are supposed to represent. While the group's defining qualities can be elusive, their political value is clear. Candidates in both major parties try to woo independents with messages emphasizing less controversial issues, like personal character, economic growth, education, and healthcare. There's little doubt that independents in Arizona will play a major role in the upcoming elections. The question on everyone's mind is, will they support Democratic candidates or Republican ones?
Hard Republicans and Democrats know who they are voting for, of course, but what about that all-too-critical block of independent voters?
We're here to talk politics. Let's jump right in. Who here regrets their votes or their non-vote in 2016? Anybody?
Not at all.
Nope.
Nope.
Okay. Talk about that. Sophia, let's start with you.
I know a lot of people are mad at me because I didn't vote for Trump or Hillary. I thought that my best use of my vote was to make a third party more powerful, because I really think that the gridlock and that we have right now, and the way that they're just like best friends anyways, and kind of have the same sponsors. So I kind of felt like there needs to be that mixing things up was more important. So yeah, a lot of people will still be mad at me for that, but I still don't regret it.
Well, in my case, I do see the Democratic Party and the Republican Party sort of as frenemies. They work together on certain things, and then on other things, they're just at loggerheads. And this cycle and last, I voted based on principles. I want to see somebody who wants to, work for the people instead of work for the people who are paying them. That's always been the rub for me.
What is most important to you this election cycle?
So I think one of the problems with elections in the past is just that because of the two-party system that we have, it's already like narrowed down the choices that we have. And I've always kind of towed the line in the middle because I was raised a fairly conservative Catholic, but on the other hand, like I'm a brown person. So I can't exactly just vote blindly with partisanship because I feel like both parties have disappointed my people. So I think what I'm looking forward to this election is I really hope that the Republicans stop allowing their party to be hijacked by right-wing extremists, and I think that the Democrats need to stop doing things based on tradition and allow newer people with different visions to come in, because I think they've also had their play in blocking out really important candidates.
I might be a different kind of independent, because in the last election, I kind of like both candidates. Most independents hate both candidates. And I had done a thing where I looked up something about Clinton and something about Trump that I liked, and I posted both of it, and then everyone hated me when I posted that. So I like a lot of things about all the candidates that are coming up right now. Yes, they have things that I like and dislike. I'm kind of with you with Kristen Susema. I'm not sure exactly where she comes in. I'd love to have more information about her. I'd love to meet her somewhere and have a conversation, which is what I try to do with any candidate. Actually meet them, actually see them, see what they're like.
Right. How about Republican Martha McSally in the Senate race? Thoughts on her?
What I was going to say is that I'm not sure about Kirsten Sinema. I am sure that I don't like any of the Republicans.
I'm sorry.
For that seat.
Right. Okay.
With McSally, I don't like her stance on immigration and some of the hard line Republican philosophy on that. It's not fully thought out. It's just more of a stance on a soundbite.
Yeah.
And she is very strong in that direction.
She's just regurgitating whatever her backers tell her to say. And I don't buy that at all.
Last question. How has the whole Red for Ed movement that we've seen in Arizona this year affected the way that you think of, education or the governor's race in general? Is this sort of the issue for you on that campaign, or does it not matter against everything else that you're considering?
I think it was the Red for Ed movement was just one of many movements of people who were just, honestly, mentally exhausted. There was just, it was insult and attack after attack, not just from the Republican Party, but from the Democrats sort of being spineless in some regard. And I think ultimately people just felt like there's nobody here to fight for me, and now I have to fight for myself. So I think the Red for Ed movement, thank God, was something that was throughout the United States, and I think that's amazing that they've been able to organize. But that was just the cherry on top for me.
Yeah, Ken?
Ron, my feeling is, and I will tell you that I have a real strong bias because I have a daughter that taught for 10 years here in Arizona, in the Phoenix area, and then gave it up because of the problems of the declining funding and making things more difficult and so on. So I don't know that I don't like to say that it's a single issue for the governor's race or anyplace else, but it is a key issue in my mind of something that needs to be solved. And I don't want to take away from the charter schools. I've got nothing against charter schools, but I think we ought to fund that opportunity for the public schools to be there too.
That was such a fascinating discussion. It's so good to get actual people in the newsroom to try to suss out how they feel beyond kind of the talking heads and the political scientists. Maria, what were the big takeaways, do you think, for candidates who are sizing up how they are going to reach these independent voters?
What I saw throughout the panel and what I've heard from other independent voters, it's really this theme of sort of mistrust or distrust, feeling like there are special interests on both sides, not being quick to believe, immediately what a candidate says in an ad or during a speech. There was a lot of talk of, I'm going to check and see if their voting record matches up with that. Also heard that they're not, single issue voters, that they want someone who will represent more than one of their interests. I think those were the main takeaways there.
Yeah, there was a bit of yearning for authenticity.
Right.
One of the voters was saying, I don't really care which way they voted. I just want them. I want to believe that they voted for a correct, valid reason. Which, this is what focus groups, candidates do with their focus groups. That kind of leads to a message of integrity, strength. But that's kind of what they're looking for, is that authentic person, not just someone who will tell them what they want to hear.
And independent voters almost do make up the largest voting bloc here in Arizona. I think part of that seems to be, in talking with these folks and others like them, these are people who came from someplace else and are not particularly Republicans, are used to maybe a different brand of Republican politics. So when we're talking about some of these primaries, especially ugly primaries that were in the U.S. Senate race, you see all of the candidates cozying up to Donald Trump. What does that pivot look like in the general election? And will discerning independent voters hold these candidates to account for perhaps taking positions that might otherwise run counter to how they truly feel?
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the tricks, is to see if there is a pivot this year in the Senate race in particular, just because that race has gone pretty far to the right. Everyone is really sort of identifying themselves as being loyal to the president's agenda and promising to do that into the future if elected. That really begs the question, where does that leave independent voters? If this is a field that is really kind of leaning hard to the right on the Republican side, do they have to vote for Kyrsten Sinema? Do they sit it out? Is this something that builds brand loyalty perhaps to the Democrats, or they just walk away? I don't know, and we'll have to see what happens once we get past the primary to see how much, if at all, there is this sort of reach back to the middle that the folks that we were just talking to want to see, and they haven't seen much of it.
When it comes to the governor's race, there are primaries on both sides. Have you started to see a messaging to the general electorate, to the broader electorate by any of the candidates, or do they seem to be kind of messaging to their corners?
Well, I can speak to Ducey, and then I don't know if you want to jump in. Sort of reviewing his most recent campaign materials, it was all over the map. So I would say it was trying to appeal to different groups. There was mention of his action on the untested rape kits, decreasing the number of kids in foster care, getting parents to pay for child support that they owe, which to me was clearly speaking to women, families, that sort of thing. Interestingly, there was a huge part in there on education, which I know we heard from our independent voters. They all think that's very disingenuous, but he knows that's important to voters and is continuing to talk about that. Also jobs in the economy, of course, since that has wide appeal.
Yeah, and this admittedly small sample size, this was not good news for Governor Ducey, no. Despite injecting what people are saying is just the most massive injection of public funds into the education system in this state. He seems to be getting no credit for it, at least among this group, who seem to think, again that word authenticity, that his support for public education is they just don't buy it.
Yeah, we heard them say, they tried to, the teachers and the parents tried to get something done. It wasn't until we had this massive, the nation's biggest walkout that he actually took action.
Well, we will be following these independent voters and other voters, as well as the issues and the candidates through November. Please follow our coverage on azcentral.com, on Twitter, and Facebook. We'll see you next time.